Wow, this room says something tonight, and I think the biggest thing that it's saying is that we care about our community, and we care about our kids, and we care about our young adults, and we care about each other. We originally thought that we were going to be meeting out in the coffee house room, and we kind of just had a feeling that something like this was going to happen, and so I can't thank you all enough for coming out tonight. Up in the balcony, anybody who's out in 1025 Place watching where we're streaming. This really, really shows what matters to us as a community, and I'm really proud to be a part of Beaver Dam right now, and I think you all should too. We have a really excellent night prepared for you. We couldn't have better speakers tonight, and I think we're going to learn a great deal, and then we'll have some time to ask some questions of our panel, and so I would like to introduce to you our keynote speaker first. Our Assistant U.S. Attorney, Julie Pfluger, is a federal prosecutor in the Western District of Wisconsin, specializing in prosecuting Project Safe Childhood cases, which includes human trafficking cases. Prior to working in Madison, Julie was a federal prosecutor in the Northern District of New York. She has also worked or volunteered in Japan, Cambodia, Ireland, Guatemala, and South Africa, and she's going to help us to understand what trafficking looks like in rural areas today. So please help me to welcome Julie Pfluger.
Okay, can you hear me? Can you guys up there hear me? All right, wow. This is impressive. I mean, I had no idea I was coming to speak to this kind of crowd, so kudos to all of you for caring, for making it out on this cold night. I speak to a lot of audiences and not a lot of packed houses like this, so good job. Just a little bit about me. I am a federal prosecutor. I do prosecute Project Safe Childhood, which includes child porn, but a lot of my cases these days are mostly sex trafficking. My background is I have my master's in social work. I was a licensed clinical social worker before I was a lawyer, and I worked in the housing projects in Chicago with child victims. I then volunteered in South Africa for a year and a half where I worked in an HIV clinic, and then I took a break from life and moved to Japan where I wanted to regather my thoughts and decided there it was I wanted to be a lawyer. During law school, I spent a summer in Guatemala working with sex trafficking victims. I spent a summer in Ireland working with refugees. And from there, since I graduated from law school, I have worked for the federal government. I moved to Wisconsin about 6 years ago now. And in the federal district that I work, it's the Western District of Wisconsin. So it's the western 2/3 of the state from north to south. I can prosecute a federal case anywhere in there. There had never been a sex trafficking case prosecuted. And my boss came to me and said, hey, this sex trafficking thing is getting a lot of attention. Do you think it happens here? And in all my naivety, I said, I don't know. And that was my honest answer. I said, I don't know if that happens here. Isn't that like a big city thing, a New York City thing, a Chicago thing? And he said, why don't you look into it? So I gathered people who knew about this, which included law enforcement, which included nonprofits, which included community members, anybody who could teach me about this. And for about a year and a half, I learned. And we had community meetings, and just so I could learn. And then I started going around the state talking to law enforcement saying, hey, this is what human trafficking is. Does it happen here? And I didn't know. And now here I am 5 years later. That's pretty much exclusively my caseload. I have had 6 trials because these cases always go to trial. I will tell you that in my experience so far, the defendants have been men, although I do have my first female charged. I don't have her charged as the primary trafficker. I have her charged as the co-conspirator, or as they would say, the bottom. So I do have a woman charged now, but in general, it's been men, and all of my victims thus far have been women, so those are the terms I will speak in. I am not saying there are not female traffickers or male victims. I'm just speaking to my experience. So in the 5 years now, it took me a couple years to get up and running, but I have had a lot of trials, and I have a lot of charged cases, and they all come from the Western District of Wisconsin, and Madison being the biggest city, but they're not all from Madison. I have cases from Sparta, I have cases from the Dells, I had a case out of Rhinelander. So I can tell you that this happens, and I can tell you it happens here. You just have to know what you're looking for, So what my goal here today is to kind of explain to you on a federal level, what is sex trafficking, okay? And then what's it look like in rural America? And then after that, I want to tell you some of my case examples just to help you know what to look for. Because I promise you it's happening here. I promise you it's happening today here. So let's get started. Oops. Okay, so here's the things. You know, this is how I start. Look, child sex trafficking in rural America. And when I first started prosecuting these, I thought, well, something doesn't fit here. It's rural America. So here's my little test. Which one doesn't belong? Okay. So which one of these doesn't belong, right? Well, what I've learned is they all belong. There is not only child, but adult sex trafficking in rural America. So just so you know, in the federal definition, a child's anyone under 18, okay? And I'm telling you this because there are different laws for child and adult. So that's going to make a difference. Okay, so then what's sex trafficking under the federal definition? Okay, so sex trafficking means you do a verb, and I'll kind of go through them. You do something. You recruit, you entice, you harbor. And then you use force, fraud, or coercion to make someone engage in a commercial sex act. So I'm going to break that down for you. Okay, so you do this verb. You recruit, you harbor, you transport, you maintain, you advertise. There's more verbs than are all listed up there. Pretty much you do something. Okay, you drive someone to a date. That qualifies. You let her live with you. You stay with you for a night. You buy her a meal. You take her money. I mean, pretty much anything. Okay, this is a pretty all-encompassing. You do the verb. And then you use force, threat of force, fraud, or coercion. And you know that this force, threat of force, fraud, or coercion is going to make her engage in a commercial sex act. Now, it's not required she actually does this, just that she thinks she has to. Because I've had cases where the victim didn't even do the commercial sex act, and I still get a conviction. But the important thing here is, right, force, that's what you think it is, physical force. Threat of force, that can be threat to the victim, to their family, to their friends, to their kids. And then coercion is the interesting one. And under the federal law, coercion means that you put her in fear of serious harm. And the definition of serious harm is not just physical harm, not you're going to break my nose or my arm, but psychological harm counts. Reputational harm counts. Financial harm counts. Okay, so you put the victim in fear of this serious harm, that's coercion. So you tell her, if you don't do this, I'm going to tell your mom. I'm going to spread this picture that I took of you. I'm going to tell her that you're a hooker. You say, you know, you're going to have nowhere to live. I'm going to call your probation officer. I'm going to kick you out. You're going to be on the street. I mean, whatever it is. And it is a combined of all of these things. And it's not serious harm that would make me do a commercial sex act, because I can't think of anything that you could do to make me. Okay, I would not do it. But it's what would it take this victim, where she's at, where she came from, with her possibly traumatic childhood, with her possibly substance abuses, with her history of trauma, with her lack of resources, with her lack of money, with her lack of support, whatever it is that's going on in her life that has put her where she is, what would it take to make her do a commercial sex act? And that's what I get to tell a jury. Okay, so I have to put the jury into this framework of not what would it take you, but look at her and here's her background. And then look at what he did. Was that enough? And I have got, knock on wood, guilty on every single case that I have done so far. Okay. Now, the reason I was defining minor earlier is because if the victim's under 18, if they're 17 and a half, you don't have to use force, threats, or coercion at all. The fact that you maintain, that you transport, that you advertise a minor for a date, for prostitution, which is sex trafficking, that's it. You are guilty. And I don't care if you don't know how old she is. I don't care if she told you she was 21. The standard used to be you had to know, or you should have known. But the standard has now been revised to say if you had a reasonable opportunity to observe this young person, you are deemed to know. So it's pretty much strict liability. Okay, if you spent time with this person, If you saw them in person. Now, look, I can't charge someone who never met the victim. They just knew them on the internet. You have to actually physically meet the victim. But if you saw her, I can say you knew. I don't care what she said. I don't care if you say you didn't know. And that is sex trafficking of a minor. So it's different. Okay, and then we have a commercial sex act, right? So there's a federal definition of a commercial sex act. In general, it's what you would think it is. It's a sex act. And it doesn't have to be completed. It's that when you do this force, coercion, manipulation, fraud, you know it's to make her engage in a commercial sex act, even if she doesn't complete it. And then we have, let's see, affecting interstate commerce. So someone was asking me earlier about, and I get this question a lot, federal prosecution. So I get these cases where you have to cross state lines. That's how I get the cases. That's not correct in these cases. This just has to impact interstate commerce. Okay, what impacts interstate commerce? You use the computer. That's interstate commerce. Every trial I have had, say there's an add-on, say it's Backpage, which doesn't exist anymore, but use it as an example. Their servers are based in Dallas. So I have them come testify, and I say, so when someone placed an ad on your service, that electronic information went from Wisconsin to Dallas, right? Yes, I got it. That you use a hotel. You use Holiday Inn. I call Holiday Inn, and I say, now where's your corporate headquarters? It's not in Wisconsin. And I say, well, do you have hotels around the country? Yeah. Around the world? Yeah. I even had a local hotel that didn't have any branches outside of Wisconsin. I called them in and I said, where do you get your sheets from? Chicago. That's interstate commerce. Use a cell phone. It's interstate commerce. If you use a condom, it's interstate commerce because I will tell you there's no condoms made in Wisconsin. So I will be able to take this case. This is not going to be my hurdle. Now look, if they cross state lines, that's a separate charge. Transporting a minor across state lines for the purpose of prostitution is a different charge, and that's a 10-year mandatory minimum, and it is easy. All I have to do is prove you drove this minor from Minnesota to Wisconsin, from Illinois to Wisconsin, or vice versa, from Wisconsin to Illinois. You transported them across the state line, and you knew in their mind one of the purposes was prostitution. That's 10-year mandatory minimum, and that is so easy to prove. So I'll charge that anytime I can. But it's different than sex trafficking. Okay, the penalties, if there's fraud, force, or coercion, it's a 15-year mandatory minimum. If the victim is under 14, it's a 15-year mandatory minimum. If the victim is 14 to 18 and there's no force, fraud, or coercion, it's a 10-year mandatory minimum. Now look, if I have a 16-year-old, it's easier for me to prove you trafficked a minor because I don't have to prove you did anything except put that ad up, drive her. But if you also did force, fraud, or coercion, if you hit her, if you threatened her, I'll get that 15-year mandatory minimum. Just because she's 16 doesn't mean I can't do the higher. But if she's 16 and there's no force, fraud, or coercion, it's a 10-year mandatory minimum. Okay, and these are mandatory minimums in the federal system where they will be served. They serve all of their time. Okay? Then there's supervised release. And they are required to get 5 years of supervised release up to life. So they will be monitored, and there's a mandatory registration as a sex offender. Now, if someone had a prior conviction for child sexual abuse or something of that matter, it's a mandatory life sentence. Okay? So these are some pretty serious penalties, which is why all of my cases go to trial. These guys don't want to spend this kind of time in jail. They honestly think they did nothing wrong. They think, well, she's just a prostitute, and I was helping her out. Look what I did. I gave her a place to live. I gave her drugs. I fed her. I drove her to her dates. I'm the good guy here, and you want to put me in jail? Okay, so they really don't think they've done anything wrong. And they're so used to using, manipulating, abusing women that they just don't see, why are you after me? I'm a nobody. Okay, statute of limitations. This is just to tell you there's no statute. Okay, I can prosecute these no matter how old they are. It's very difficult the older they get, but I can do it. Okay, I'm really quickly going to tell you how the law is a little different in Wisconsin. This is not my specialty. Perhaps the district attorney could tell you more. But there's a little bit of differences, right? So one of them is Commercial Sex Act is different. Okay, so as I understand it, in the state of Wisconsin, Federally, you have to have physical touching, okay? In the state of Wisconsin, the touching could be through the clothes, and stripping counts. Federally, if someone forces a woman to strip, that's not sex trafficking. It may be labor trafficking, but I can't charge sex trafficking. As I understand it, the state of Wisconsin, you could charge forcing someone to strip, do a sexual performance. That could be trafficking. So there's a few differences, and there's different penalties. The maximum in the state of Wisconsin is 25 years. So there's a maximum of 15 years confinement and a maximum of 10 years supervision. So those are our minimums, so there's a little bit different. I love this quote. So I don't know if any of you know of Rachel Lloyd from GEMS, Girls Education Mentoring System. She's a survivor herself. She has founded this organization in New York that helps survivors. She has an amazing documentary called Very Young Girls, and it interviews some of these young girls who got into this life and kind of really explains life from their point of view. But what she says is, look, lack of options and desperation, that's going to make you make poor decisions. And traffickers know that. That's who they look for. Okay, yes, maybe these people have made some bad decisions. That does not mean they deserve to be trafficked. And that's what I have to explain to my jury, because most of the time, the defense attorneys will be arguing, he didn't handcuff her, she could leave. And he gave her a place to live. And he gave her food. And look, the doors weren't locked, she could walk out. And she actually said she loved him. So what is this trafficking? Right, did maybe the victims make some choices that could have been different? Maybe, yeah. But that does not mean that they deserve to be trafficked. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about rural America. So what's rural America? Okay, this just kind of shows you the rural counties. Okay, this is another graphic of rural America, right? It's most of America. It's not most of the population, but it's most of the land. So how does this all tie together? Okay, this is what we see, right? Atlanta, the Super Bowl, these big events, that's where trafficking is. And I'm not saying that's not true. Big events do attract trafficking. Big cities do attract trafficking. But what I'm saying is, look, this is what a lot of people think. Okay, so here's this graph. Where do foreign victims come from? Thailand, China, Malaysia, a lot of different countries. That's what a lot of people in the general public think is trafficking. They don't think of the girl next door from Sparta. That was my first case. Okay? The victims were all from Sparta, Wisconsin. So if you're looking for the foreign girl, if you're looking for a big semi-truck, with girls chained up and you push them out, that's not what you're going to see here. And if that's what you're looking for, you're going to miss what's happening. Okay? A lot of my victims from one case were from the Dells. Okay? So what do rural victims look like? Well, they look like big city victims. They just have special vulnerabilities, okay? It's often women, minors. There's usually a history in some kind of system, whether it be child protection or the legal system. Usually a history of some kind of abuse or neglect, sometimes drugs, but not always. Okay. Why is this such a problem in rural areas? Well, up here, there's higher rates of poverty in rural areas. There's decreasing job opportunities in rural areas. And young people or vulnerable people in rural areas are often just looking for an escape, right? Like, I want something bigger. I want something better. And there is a lack of services. There's a lack of education. There's a lack of law enforcement awareness about this issue. Also, right, we're all aware of the opioid epidemic. And I'm not saying it's a rural problem exclusively, but it's different in the rural areas, because when you have someone who wants help and they have to travel an hour for their methadone clinic and they don't have a car, that's a problem. And when, the rates of the heroin addictions have kind of stabled, but what hasn't stabled is in rural areas, the rates of heroin-addicted babies has skyrocketed. Not in big cities it hasn't, but in rural areas it has, because pregnant women cannot get the services that you could get in a big city. So their babies are being born addicted, right? So it's a different issue, and addicts are more vulnerable in rural areas. This is just to show you, look, these are the top 20 cities where, trafficking happens according to NCMEC, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, right? So what's missing in there? Most of the center of the country, right? Most of rural America. In these 20 cities, that's where the resources are. So what's missing in the rest of the country is a lot of the resources that these places have. Okay, rural, what does sex trafficking look like? Commercial front brothels is listed as number 1. I have to say I've never seen that. I haven't seen it in Wisconsin. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but truck stops, hotels, internet-based, and then the labor trafficking, that's a separate issue, but that also happens in rural America. Okay, one thing, this is what I wanted to show you now. So before I got ready to do this presentation today, I thought, look, how can I show you guys that this really happens here? So I went on some law enforcement tools, and I went on some websites, and I just wanted to show you some things I found. And I'm not saying these are trafficking, but I'll tell you my observations. This ad, October 20th, 2018, from Skip the Games. Okay, it says, call me for a good time. And what cities are listed? Wausau, Madison, Watertown, and Beaver Dam. Okay, this was just posted. Now, I went on a law enforcement database, and I looked up this female. Those are all cities where she has been posted in the past month. So she's traveling. Okay, and you probably can't read it, but on the left, in that red square, what it says is immature. This has been flagged as a young person. Okay? Now, I'm not saying this is trafficking. There's a difference between prostitution and trafficking. Okay? If she's on her own, if she wants to do this, I don't prosecute that. The state may, other people may, but I don't. That is not trafficking. But I can tell you that she's very young. I can tell you that she's traveling, which a lot of people who choose to do this on their own don't necessarily travel. Just my observation. Okay, here's another one that I saw. Okay, this is posted today. There's a massage, okay, and it says they serve, Hartford, Menominee Falls, Beaver Dam, okay. Okay, here, this was posted in Portage, Skip the Games, October 31st. So what's interesting to me about this, and I don't really know how to work this red pointer, so I'm not going to do that, but what's interesting to me is, what would make me think this is trafficking is, one, that looks like a young person. Two, on the left, it says, twice in the ad, it says absolutely no black men and absolutely no black men. Okay. To me, that signals trafficking, not someone working on their own. Because when you have a trafficker, they will not let you see black men because they think black men are another pimp who's going to steal you away. So if this was a woman working on her own, I'm not sure she would put that. I'm not saying this is trafficking, it's just my observation. So she says, I'm in Portage, no law enforcement, you better be ready to meet if you call me, okay? This one, also, from Skip the Games, look how young this person looks. And she says, my best friend and I are in town for one night. What that says to me is, one, she's really young. Two, a lot of times when there's more than one girl, they're being trafficked. Because a lot of people who work on their own, they don't do it with their friends. It's usually some man, some trafficker is in charge of them. And this is all places that this girl has traveled. She's been around the country. I have no proof this is trafficking, but what I can tell you is these posts are from Portage, from Beaver Dam, within the last month. So take that for what it's worth. Okay, so now these are some case studies. These are real cases that I have prosecuted. This is Maurice Adonis Withers. That's his real name, and he goes by Adonis, and he's from the Dells. He trafficked 5 women, 2 minors and 3 adult women. He met one of them at the arcade at the Kalahari. That's where he was trolling. He met a girl. She was there. She was living in a group home. The first night he met her, he had sex with her, gave her an STD, and put her out for her first date. Okay. He met the other ones, some of the other ones, on social media. Okay. I don't think you're going to be able to read this, but I'll try to read it to you. So I did a search warrant of his Facebook account, okay? And here's what it says. He's talking to his friend Doug, and Doug says, so where we knock these hoes at? And Adonis says, it starts right here on the book. Facebook, social media has us connected to over 100 million women worldwide. Got to use it to our advantage. Anywhere, I might catch them at the gas station. I might pull over so you're walking down the street. They're all around us. You just have to show them something bigger and better. It don't matter where the bitch at. So his friend says, I'm about to start this networking. Adonis says, Instagram, Snapchat, Tinder, plenty of fish. Just go through my friends list on my page and you'll see all these strippers, hoes, and thoughts across the US. Okay, this is present in rural America. All the kids, young people, have social media, okay? This is a video I found on his Facebook account, so I just wanted to give you a little taste of what he's like.
What's up, Facebook? What's up, YouTube? What's up, Wisconsin? You know, we just out here, goddammit. We just out here really pimping hard on these hoes, man. You know, I don't know nothing else, man. You know, you can't put a sack in my hand, man. You know, I might fuck it off a little bit, man. I just love the game like Michael Jordan, baby. You know, it's Michael at his finest. You know what I'm saying? And we trying to take over this year, man. We trying to get filthy rich this year, man, for real.
Right. So that's him after he took the women and girls out to Las Vegas. He took 2 of the minors and 2 of the adults out to Las Vegas. And he's broadcasting this on his YouTube channel back to Wisconsin. Hey guys, look at what a big star I am. And the minors in this case, you know, they're from smaller towns in Wisconsin. They think this is awesome. They said on the stand, he took me to Vegas. I was only 15. My parents would never let me go to Vegas. Right, of course, right? But in this case, I don't have to prove, if you're a minor, I don't have to prove he forced you. All I have to prove is he did it and you were a minor. So I don't care if you said, yep, sign me up, let's go. Okay, he took 15-year-olds out to Las Vegas to traffic them. Okay, Backpage is now down, but this is just an example because, like you saw, Skip the Games, there's a lot of other websites. Backpage had their very own pages for all these small towns. You know, I lived in Plattsburgh, New York. I also lived in Bloomington, Illinois. Okay, all these small towns had their own page. So this shows there's a market. And one of my victims from this Adonis case, she told me she would do dates for him. She called them dates, so that's what I call them. She would do dates for him in Madison. They went to Milwaukee once, but she said, I'm not going to do what they want me to do for $50. There's such a glut of supply. There's so many people working there selling sex, she couldn't get the money. In Madison, a little more, but she said the best places were the small towns because she could charge $200 transportation fee to go out if she had to drive an hour. Okay? So she says the best places, when they would put their ads up, they would say, I'm in Madison or I'm in the Dells, but I will travel. And that was their best money-making nights when they got to the small towns. Okay, so on Backpage, you could buy a dog. You could also buy a girl, right? And it's the same today. Just because Backpage is down, nothing has changed. This is one of the ads he put up in Las Vegas, and I don't know if you can see it in the background, but right behind her face, it says Lost Children's Area. Okay. And this is him. He was advertising himself, too. He was selling himself. This guy did anything for money. He bred pit bulls, he stole computers, he trafficked women, and he sold himself. He would do whatever it took. So at trial, his defense was, we were just a big band of happy hookers. Look, I'm selling myself too. How could I be trafficking them if I'm selling myself? But the thing is, he didn't abuse himself. He didn't beat himself. He didn't, so all the things he did to these women and girls, right, he did it by choice. They did not. Okay, I'm gonna skip this one, I think. This was also on his Facebook page, and I really enjoyed showing this to the jury. He has a tattoo that says, ain't no money like home money. And then this was his Facebook page, it says, fuck the feds, pussy bought me everything. So the jury got to see that. He was sentenced to 18 years. Okay, I got him on all counts: trafficking of minors, trafficking of adults, transportation across state line for prostitution, In one count of attempted trafficking, there was on the final night with his main victim, he was trying to make her do a date in a hotel, and she literally ran out of the hotel. It was in Janesville, in her bare feet and her lingerie, and ran to the Perkins across the street. So she didn't actually do a date that night, but I charged that as attempted trafficking. So he was convicted on all the counts. Okay, Peter Deal, here's another guy I prosecuted, okay? And that video that was shown before I started speaking, that hits home because that is real. And this is one case where it's very similar. So Peter Deal lives up in Superior. This is Mr. Deal. He trolls Kick. And he meets a 14-year-old who lives in Virginia. Her mom just got remarried, had a new baby. She says, Mom doesn't love me anymore. She had depression. She had back surgery for scoliosis. He says, oh, your mom's being hard on you. Why don't I come pick you up? She says, okay. So Peter Deal drove from Superior to Suffolk, Virginia, and he picked her up. And she says, he literally said, come on out. She snuck out her window. She got out there. She saw him, and her heart sank. She was like, oh, this is bad. I don't want to do this. But at this point, she snuck out, and she's already in trouble. So even though her heart is telling her, don't do this, she gets in the car. And the first thing he does is takes her phone and throws it out the window and runs it over. And then he takes her back to Minnesota. This is her missing poster. Her family was looking for her for 2 months. What happened finally is he would let her call home occasionally just to try to soothe her mom, say, Mom, I'm okay, I'm with this man, I love him. But it was always from a blocked number. He would let her email sometimes, but it was from an anonymous IP address. Well, one day he slipped up, and he forgot to block his phone number, and she called home. Mom gets a phone number. Within a half hour, the police are there. Okay? And this is what they find. They have been living in a house with no electricity, no water, buckets of urine and feces. That's a branding iron he made. I have videos of him chasing her around with it. That's prenatal vitamins down there. When he was interviewed, he said the prenatal vitamins were for him because he was very low on his iron. Okay. There was pregnancy tests all over the place. And what we found was he had been having a sexual relationship with this 14-year-old, but he also had put her on Backpage. And if there's a silver lining in this story, we got to her before she did any dates. But he had put her on Backpage, and that was his plan to get people to start coming and paying for dates. So I actually got him on transportation of a minor across the state line. I could have charged attempted sex trafficking. I could have charged a lot of things, but what I wanted was to charge him with something, probably the easiest thing with the best sentence. So he got 20 years. That's him at the time of sentencing. You can see he looks vastly different. Jail was not kind to him. This is the first case I ever did out of Sparta. So this case started as what the police thought was a drug trafficking case. Neighbors are calling saying, hey, there are people coming and going all the time. We don't know what's up. So the police start sitting on the house saying, oh, drug trafficking, got it. And one of the things in small towns is, right, everybody knows everybody, which is kind of what makes it really hard for victims to come forward. Well, one of the people they saw coming and going to this house, they knew, and they also knew she had very bad asthma and that she went to the hospital a lot. So they called the hospital and said, hey, next time she comes in for her asthma, give us a call. We want to talk to her. Okay? Now, right, in a big city, this is not going to happen because people don't know each other. They don't know someone coming from a house that has asthma. So they start talking to her, and she starts writing notes, and they're asking her about all of these, drug trafficking things, and she's talking about cocaine and heroin and all this stuff going on in this house. And then she writes something off to the right of the screen, but she crosses it out right away. And the detective said, well, what'd you do? She said, never mind, nothing, it's not important. The detective followed up. He did not drop it. What did you write? Tell me what you write. Finally, turns out what she wrote was prostitution forced with gun. And she was so terrified to even write it, she crossed it out. And that's how this case came to the attention of law enforcement. If it wasn't for this detective, they would have just thought it was another drug house. Okay? This is just some evidence. It's just to show you, how this stuff happens. So this is the defendant texting one of the victims saying, you have a call. She says, okay, 10 or 15 minutes. Okay, he says Viroqua, which is going to be a lot of money because it's a smaller area. So the trafficker says, call him, go get the money. After the date, and again, this is not a date by my standard, right? This is not any date that you would ever go on, but that is what my victims have called them. So I'm calling them dates. After the date, she texts and say, don't be so mad. I know I should have called you. There's certain rules you have to follow. You call me beforehand, you call me after, you come right out, you give me the money. If you break any of the rules, there will be consequences. And so she's texting, don't be so mad. I know I should have called. He says, what's the P code for the safe? I don't know. When I get this phone dump, I don't know what that means. So I ask the woman, what does that mean? She says, oh, we were staying in a hotel that night, and when we got to the hotel, he told me to put something in the safe. Well, what was it? His gun. So him saying, what's the P code of the safe means I will have the gun out when you get back. That's a threat. You wouldn't know that just by looking at the phone. Okay, so very common in these cases is these victims cannot get out of debt with these traffickers. No matter what they do, they always owe more money. So here's one. He says, 3 o'clock with a regular. You should be in the clear after that. After the date, guess you're not in the clear. You were supposed to call me. You didn't call. That's another 100 you owe me. So now we're at 110. She testified at trial. One time she went to go do his laundry, and when she got back, she owed him $500 because he said you missed 5 calls. One time she unplugged his phone to plug in her phone. His phone wasn't dead. It just wasn't charging. She owed him $250 for that because his phone might have gone dead and they would miss a call. Okay, so that's how this works. And I remember her testifying. She's looking out the window in Sparta. Okay, she's on probation. He keeps saying, I'm going to call the police on you if you don't do what I want. Also, she's a heroin addict. Some of these victims do have addiction issues. Not all of them. The ones who went out to Las Vegas, they didn't touch any drugs. But he keeps saying, I'm not going to give you your heroin. I'm going to call the police. I'm going to kick you out. And he does kick her out sometimes. She has to sleep outside in February in a tank top and shorts. You know, they do things to humiliate these victims that are beyond what you could even imagine. It's awful. So she says she's looking out the window, and there's train tracks in Sparta right outside the window, and she hears a train coming, and she thinks in her head, my 2 options for my life are to continue doing what he says or to run in front of that train. I have no other option. In her mind, that's her world. There's no treatment. There's no one to help her. She can't run away. So that's the kind of thing I present to a jury to say, what would it take to get her to do a commercial sex act? Okay. This is Alexander Klubal. Okay, again, that video. He trolls Facebook and joins a group called Single Moms because he knows single moms have daughters who might be vulnerable. So he befriends a couple of these moms, and Taylor Page, that's not her real name, he can see her posts because he's friends with her mom. And you can see she puts a bottle of Xanax would do the trick, fall out, it'd be over. I swear to fucking God, I'm going to kill myself. He doesn't know her. He's never met her. But here's what happens. Literally, he sends her, hi. She says, who are you? Alex. She says, where are you? He says, Wisconsin. She says, okay. He says, okay, what? Like, okay, you need a place to stay and are down to make money, or okay to where I live? She lives in Tennessee. She's like, I don't live anywhere near you. He said, I'll get you a train ticket. She said, I don't know where I'm going. You'd have to pick me up. I'm not getting on a train by myself. Oh, there he drives. He leaves right that minute. And he goes down to Tennessee, and he picks her up. And the next day, he gets back to Wisconsin, and within an hour, she's on Backpage. And she's 15. Okay, so that video where you meet someone online and say, hey, your parents aren't being nice to you, I'll come get you, that's real. Okay. This is kind of a news article from Mercer. It's a case that was out of there. I'm going to skip that. But pretty much what I wanted to get across to you today is kind of what sex trafficking is, why it's a problem in rural America, and what it looks like here, and to let you know that it really does happen here, okay? And I hear a lot of things, and I'm not saying that it's not true. I hear a lot of things about, you know, like stables. You have like 20 girls, and they're organized into madams and bottoms, and that's not what I've seen here in Wisconsin. because we don't have these huge cities where you're going to be able to have a stable of 20 women, but it doesn't make it any less bad or any less wrong. There are women and girls, and I'm sure there's men and boys here in our small communities who are being targeted and exploited by predators. Okay, these guys know what they're looking for. There's a reason they target vulnerable people. And there's a reason it's called grooming. They groom them. Maybe it'll take one night and you get them on their first date, their first night. Maybe it'll take 6 months. It doesn't matter, because once they have that person in that cycle, that's their money train. I have a 19-year-old now. She worked for it's the one where the man is charged and the woman, what I call the bottom, is also charged. She worked for them for 2 years. She said an average night she made $2,000, and they made her work every single night. Okay, that's their meal ticket. So once they have this rolling, once they have this coercion, this manipulation, this violence going, they are not going to let it go. Because, like, say it's heroin or crack. You sell it once, it's gone. Say it's this woman or girl next to you, you got her every night. So I guess I just wanted to wrap up by saying I hope this raises your awareness to know what's happening here, open your eyes and know what you're looking for. And I really thank you all for coming out. This is an amazing turnout.
Thank you so much, Julie. That really brings it home for us. So sometimes hard things to hear and see, but that's really what's going to make us understand and pay attention. So I'm so appreciative for your knowledge, your experience, but also for your delivery. You're very easy to listen to, and you're a great communicator. So Julie's going to stay up here and be part of the Q&A time, because I'm sure you may have things that you want to ask her as well. But what I'd like to do right now is call our panel to come on up and have a seat while I introduce them. So because I'm not sure what order they're going to be stepping up, I'll just have you kind of raise your hand when I start with you. Yeah, come on up and go ahead and take your seats while I introduce you. So I'm first going to introduce District Attorney Kurt Klomberg. So if you, yep, thank you. Mr. Klomberg leads the Dodge County District Attorney's Office. The office represents the state of Wisconsin in criminal actions in the Dodge County courts. Mr. Klomberg has held this office since 2010. During his career, he has handled thousands of cases for the state, ranging from simple misdemeanors to first-degree homicide. So thank you, Mr. Klomberg, for being on our panel. Then we have Detective Heather Johnson. Detective Johnson has been with our police department for 15 years and a detective for 10 years. Her position has evolved to primarily covering sensitive crimes such as child abuse and sexual assaults. Detective Johnson is trained in forensic interviewing, which is an interviewing technique that is required when interviewing child victims and witnesses. Their detective division works together on trafficking cases. Mrs. Johnson is also an ICAC, which is Internet Crimes Against Children affiliate, where she works with the Department of Justice and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Thank you for being on our panel. And then at the table over to your right, we have very honored to have you with us tonight, two survivors and advocates. And so I'm going to start with Morgan Meadows. So if you want to just raise your hand, thank you. Morgan is a doctoral candidate with Concordia University, specializing in transformational leadership. As a former victim of domestic minor human trafficking, including being used in the sex industry, her emerging consulting work focuses on preparing communities like ours to respond to the unique needs of trafficked persons. She's also a Shared Hope ambassador and survivor of 20 years of human trafficking. Thank you for being with us, Morgan. And lastly, we have Trish Propson. Trish is the founder of Broken or Beautiful. It's a beautiful site to even just Google online later. Speaker and author. She is also a sexual abuse survivor, and her programs are designed to raise awareness, inspire healing, and advocate for change surrounding sexual abuse, prostitution, and trafficking issues. Trish is an ordained crisis response chaplain, sexual abuse advocate, and crisis response counselor. So I want to say, because I see the people in the balcony, and I know there's people out in 1025, and we don't want to forget about you. So if you have a question, we're going to have 2 runners having mics and coming around. So if you are in the balcony or 1025 and you have a question, please just make your way into this room and, just grab a place to stand and have your hand up. And otherwise, if you have a question, we ask you to just put your hand up. There's the other mic, Mary. And one of our runners will come to you. Please, when you get the mic with your question, if you're able, stand up so everybody can hear really well. So with that, we are going to open it up to questions and answers and comments for our panel. Don't be shy. This is your chance.
Were you guys in town or were you hours away when the situations happened? Both of you, yeah.
I'm not from Wisconsin,
Okay.
so I was originally, during my time of exploitation, I lived in Southern California.
Okay.
So it was a small town, yes, Orange County between San Diego and Los Angeles is where I was.
And then for you?
Thank you for the question. I'm new to Wisconsin. I was born in Iowa, but when I was an infant, my mother moved us to California. So mine started in California, quite a few different places. I was 3, and it also happened in New Jersey and Pennsylvania and Texas. Other places that I probably can't tell you because I don't know where I was quite young, and we were just traveling through.
Well, thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Jerry Lokola. I come from Liberia, and I've been working in South Sudan on some of these cases as well for the last 3-4 years. My question goes to the Assistant Attorney General. I wanted to find out what, after all the court process and the sentencing, what does the court do for the victims? What happens to their lives? That's one. The second question has to do with, you talk about the perpetrators, but what happens to those people who also aid and abet these crimes? Thank you.
How about now? Okay. First, I'm not an assistant attorney general. Thank you for the compliment. Okay, so I think your first question was about the victims and survivors and what does the court do for them? Is that right? The victims, right. Okay, so the court does nothing in the federal system, and I can let the district attorney speak to the state system, but in the federal system, they do nothing. There is mandatory restitution. I can tell you that in the cases I've prosecuted, I have not gotten restitution granted, partly because the traffickers that I have dealt with have no money. According to the law, that should not be a factor, but it has been. According to the law, not only should the victims get restitution for counseling and trauma services and things they need, but they should get restitution for the cost of their services. They should be paid as if they were legally working, and I have not had that happen yet. So the court does nothing. It's been very difficult for me as a former social worker and now as a prosecutor to separate myself from these victims, knowing that after, this is a very long process I go through with them testifying at trial. I'll usually be with them several years. I get to know them very well, and then knowing there's not a lot out there for them. I have to keep in mind it's not my job to provide those services. I'm not a social worker anymore, but it is very frustrating, kind of just leaving them hang out there. There's drug court. If they're in the system and they have drug issues, that can kind of help. There is, there's some nonprofits. There's one in Madison that I've dealt with a lot called Project Respect, who's been a lifesaver for me. I try to hook them up with services, but I have to say, there's not a lot, and that makes me really sad. Your second question was the co-conspirators, like other people? Is that?
Hotel owners where you guys come and stay, they won't be staying, they be renting an apartment and the same things happen.
Right, so that's a good question. There have been cases around the country where properties have been forfeited, where hotels have been seized. In my cases, that has not happened because I can't prove the hotels knew anything about it. There is one of my last trial, it was right out of Madison, and it was right near downtown Madison, and it was a guy, he was the cleaning man, the maintenance man in this commercial building. And he was trafficking women out of there. And I cannot believe that the owners of this building didn't know. And so these, not federally, not me, but the city is going after him for not, the trafficker's already in jail. He got 22 years. But they're going after the owners to try to take the building from them. But aside from that, I haven't gone after any like hotels or, but that's my first case where we're going after the property. But I'll let the district attorney speak to that.
Well, on the first question about what happens with the victims and what the courts do, largely there isn't a lot the courts can do in the state either. But in Wisconsin, crime victims have rights, and there is an Office of Crime Victim Services in Madison. We are in the DA's office in every county, including our office. We have victim services professionals that connect with the victims. They can connect them up with services. If we're talking about a child victim who lives in our community, they're going to get connected with human services, child protective services, and there's going to be services delivered that way. And if they live in a different county, they would be connected up with the child protective services in that county because it's the county that has jurisdiction over where the child lives. So there are services for child victims. There are ways to try to connect victims with services, but there's a lot more that we can do and I wish we could do.
My question is for the district attorney. What are some of the laws regarding prostitution in Wisconsin?
And thank you. One of the things that I think is important to draw a distinction between is the federal system and the state system. The federal system, they tend to handle larger, more broad cases, and we're handling the street crimes that are occurring in the community. Julie's jurisdiction is vastly greater than mine. She covers that huge area of the state. We're just Dodge County, and each county has their own. And so we have a number of crimes dealing with adult commercial prostitution. There's simple misdemeanor type prostitution. Even simply asking a person for commercial sex is a misdemeanor in Wisconsin. There doesn't have to be any actual act that commences. But then there's also keeping a place of prostitution. There's pandering, which is connecting prostitutes and customers. And some of these are misdemeanors, some are felonies. If you're soliciting a person into prostitution, meaning you're actually recruiting them to come in and be a ongoing worker in the industry, that's a felony. Maintaining a place or a prostitution or a brothel is a felony. And then if you get into any kind of child prostitution, trafficking a child or soliciting a child for prostitution, those are very serious felonies in the state of Wisconsin, carrying very, very long sentence potentials for them. There are a number of other crimes that relate to what I consider related crimes to trafficking, child pornography, and sexual exploitation of a child, using a child in making pornography. There's laws in the states that are very, very substantial in terms of their penalties, and we actually prosecute quite a few of those types of crimes here in Dodge County.
Yeah, and I didn't mention this earlier, but also, when I have a minor victim in sex trafficking, if there's a picture that would qualify as child pornography, I will charge that every time because that's a 15-year mandatory minimum, and it's so easy to prove because if I find it on the bad guy's phone, you have child pornography.
I notice that sometimes, well, a runaway runs away from the family who's been abusive, and when they're recovered as being a victim, I notice sometimes they have to return to that family. What can be done in a situation like that? Is there any counseling involved so that the victim can get help, or can they be relocated to a foster family?
I'll gladly take that. I work with victims from all over, many from rural areas. A lot of times the victims I work with are repeat. These are girls I've seen many, many times before. There are often runaways, and they are returned to their families. I just want to make the point that they ran away for a reason, and it's not always, a lot of times it's situations beyond their control. You might have thoughts on that as well. But sometimes when I'm working with a victim, I knowingly have to send her back into a situation where I know she's in danger. Because there aren't a lot of follow-up services. I've had situations with minors where, the law enforcement officers might say to me, this is the third time I've seen her. She'll be back. So it is a situation where oftentimes they are being returned to dangerous family dynamics. One of you said that there is more we can do, and I think just even gathering here tonight sheds some light on that and some awareness on that. I don't know if there's anything.
Well, what I know from having become familiar with California law and Washington law, places I lived before I came to Wisconsin, in researching my own history to understand how what happened to me could have happened, because mine was within the family, an extension of the family, and covered over within the religion I was in. So I went undetected. And hearing about the cases that have been won, tonight I get excited to hear about people being brought to our sense of justice. None of the individuals that were ever involved in my trafficking ever were brought to justice. They were never even brought before a court of law because I was silent until I was in my 30s. And I didn't get out of it until I was in my 20s. And I was married to someone when I was 17, and he continued on the tradition. So you don't know what these children are facing. They can't tell you. I couldn't tell people what I was facing. I could barely make this words when I was in my 30s to my therapist. It was so awful to admit to hiding those kinds of things having happened in my life. I was never on the street, but the way it happens with people being on the street is also kind of diminishing because of the ease in which the internet is being used. And so being able to talk about your family, the experience as a child, when there were marks on my body discovered by nurses in school, when I was at school, they didn't know the family, and on 2 occasions, Child Protective Services was called. This was my mother and my stepfather, once on the East Coast, once on the West Coast. They came to the house, and by the time they got to the house to pursue what was going on in that household, I was already approached with, do you want to separate this family? Do you want to make it so that we move again? Do you, you should just tell them you're lying. You're a liar, right? So that's what was going on in the household by the time I was 10. And I had opportunities where if I had known the words, if I had known what to say, I would have said it, and I would have protected my 2 brothers and I. But I did not know. I was between a rock and a hard place. And that is the situation that we have with our young people today. If they go, where are they going? In some places, like in the state of Washington, A 13-year-old can get services through a domestic violence agency and go into a shelter. I am still learning about Wisconsin law, and I don't know if that kind of provision even exists at this time.
Well, I can shed a little light on that in that, so I work with an agency in Madison called Briar Patch, and they have a few beds for minors who, they specifically have, it's a shelter, and they have beds specifically for minors who are victims of trafficking, and that's a new thing. I'm not a policy person or a legislative person, but what I understand is when they get someone in one of those beds, if that person has family, they are required to contact them within 24 hours, and they have to do this whether they want to or not. They're working on a legislative fix where it would give them some discretion that they could wait 3 days. Because what if it is a situation where there's something bad going on at home? So that's some kind of policy change that is going on. I also, do you know about that? No? Okay. I forgot what else I was going to say. Okay, so that's all.
I guess I want to also add something. The question about sending a child back to a home where they've run away from, that's also part of the dynamic that the trafficker uses to trap the victim. Because they tell them, well, do you want to go back to where you came from? But I'm taking such good care of you, do you want to go back there? Or there's a threat that's used, I'm going to send you back there. Don't call the police because they'll send you back there. And so, that's actually a very important question, and that is one of the areas that we really do have to spend more time trying to figure out how do we deal with that issue, because it's one of the things that causes these victims to not report, because they're stuck between the rock and the hard place of saying, do I report this person who's feeding me, clothing me, and not maybe beating me as much as I got beat when I was back home, or do I go back home?
I remember one more thing. I remember what I was going to say. There's also been a change in the law recently. So it used to be when law enforcement got a report, and this is a little tangential, but related to families and trafficking and where kids come from. There used to be, if a law enforcement got a report that a family member was trafficking a child, it was mandated. You have to report that. You have to do something. But if it was a foster parent, if it was not a relative, not a parent, no report was required. Not only no report was required, but there was no report to take. That has changed. So now, if it's a non-parental figure, a non-custodial figure, and law enforcement gets a tip, gets word that say the foster parent is trafficking, or someone the child lives with is doing some kind of trafficking activity, that is mandated to be reported. Do you know about that? No? Okay. Well, I know that's true in Madison.
I wanted to add one little thing about this to help you understand the mindset of a person who's being victimized in this way, though. There is a term called barbed wire syndrome, and we might be able to associate that easily with what we understand what prisoners of war go through. Their world does not exist outside that barbed wire except in their imagination, but physically and emotionally they cannot imagine their life beyond it at a certain point because of the deprivation that they go through. And it takes a long time to heal that. And what that feels like, I can tell you what the barbed wire syndrome feels like, is you can be 1,000 miles away from the person who used to abuse you. But it feels like if you turned around, they're going to be within touching distance. It takes a long time to heal this syndrome. We have a name for it, a syndrome, but it's the reality that your life is so determined by someone else's whims and distortions. It takes a long time to undo that from yourself. It takes a lot of, and so those are the kinds of, for you as concerned citizens, learn about what you can do and the field of restoration. You don't need to understand everything about human trafficking to know that survivors are going to need a lot of support.
Hi. My question, and I don't know if each one of you could answer this, but what would be your best advice for us as a community to help protect our children from getting caught up in this type of activity?
I'll answer that because, a lot of people ask me, why didn't you get out? When I was a teen, why didn't you just change or stop or get away? And I like to make the point with people that I did not become a trafficking victim. And trafficking looked different back in the day. We didn't have internet. I wasn't in and out of hotels, and there was no cash being exchanged. It was a different landscape back then. But I didn't become a trafficking victim the first time I was sold for sex. I became a trafficking victim when I was 3, when I was assaulted for the first time by a family member. So, I think one thing that I like to make clear, and there's some handouts out on the table that Five Stones has put together that I would refer you to, or any of our websites. I think part of what we need to be looking at is at the younger ages of at-risk children. And all of us in this room, unless you're out really working with trafficking and sexual assault victims, you may never meet a trafficking victim. But I guarantee you that there are people in your circle of influence who have been sexually assaulted and are being exploited in other ways. And so, I would encourage you to arm yourself with awareness and to really understand the signs of childhood sexual abuse. One of the statistics, I think it was in your video, 90% of trafficking victims were sexually assaulted as children. Was that from Polaris or one of the websites maybe? And that, I find that to be true. Every sex trafficking victim I've worked with, every exploitation victim I've worked with was assaulted as a child. And so it's kind of the making of a trafficking victim that we need to look at. We need to look at the whole person from the time they're young until the time where maybe they have contact with law enforcement for the first time, or they need to be rescued out of a situation that's gotten beyond what they can handle. Sexual assault teaches a child a way to live that says, don't talk about it, don't tell anyone, it's your fault. You did this, you're responsible for this. Bad things are gonna happen because of you. And so as a childhood sexual assault victim grows up, those messages stay with them. So when in those internet clips, texting conversations, those are very real. And this is happening in the upstairs bedrooms of our, nice suburban and rural homes. These are not, many children that I work with are just the girl next door. They're very, normal seeming children, living life, and we would never know what's going on. But the reason that they're susceptible to grooming when they're 12, 13, 14, as the video was showing, or some of the cases that she cited, is because they've been training for this since they were little children. And so they know exactly what they need and what they want. And for most of the victims that I work with, and this was my experience as well, I needed someone to protect me. And I wanted someone to love me. So it was very easy the first 40-year-old man. I lost my virginity to him when I was 12. He raped me. It was very easy for me to give in to that because he promised me love and care and protection. And my first thought with that man was, I wonder if I'm going to marry him now. Because I was a child, and I thought as a child thought, and I had an innocence that still existed and yet in many ways had been taken from me. So we have to start thinking about the whole child and what's gone on in their life from the time they're little, when was their first assault happening, and what that's taking them to. Most of the middle school victims that I work with are looking for a boyfriend. And, many of the clips that you shared allude to that fact. The last thing they think is that they're going to end up in a hotel getting paid for sex. Many of them have never had sex. A lot of them don't even really know what it is. And so for them to be, going into these situations willingly is because they're looking for that love. They're looking for protection. They're looking for nurturing. They're looking for a man who says they're pretty and loves them. And so again, if we can start to be aware of these at-risk youth among us at earlier ages, we can start to be in relationship with them and develop mentoring types of relationships with them, get to know their families, help them figure out who they are and what they want to be and what are their longings and what are their disappointments, so that at younger ages we can start to speak into their lives so that they don't get to be 14 or 15 and ready to jump in a car with a guy from thousands of miles away.
I'd like to touch on the question as well about protecting, what can we do to try to protect our own kids and keep them from getting into this lifestyle. And some of the practical things that I see that I really developing very quickly are just our use of electronics. Most of our kids at a very young age are getting fully internet capable cell phones. We all have computers in our home. I mean, I have multiple computers in my home, iPads. Make sure you're paying attention to the usage. We're parents, we're grandparents, they're children. They don't have privacy rights, okay? Now that may be a hard thing to do because you want to let your kids have some freedom and that, but you should be looking in their phone. You should be making sure that when they're using the computer and they're on the internet, they should be doing it in the family room with other people around. They don't get to go off and lock themselves in the bathroom or in their bedroom and be on the computer all night, because that's a recipe for disaster. That's how these people are connecting up. Number of Julie's cases, the perpetrators were identifying people through the use of social media. And it's a dangerous world, and that cell phone is a window into your home, and it's a window into your children's lives. You need to pay attention to what's going on. You should be on their phone. You should have access to it. It's your responsibility as a parent, as grandparents, and don't be afraid to go and look around their room and know who their friends are and where are they at night, and just have those sorts of practical things that parents have done for forever, that now we also have to take into account all of these electronics. And we all want our kids to be able to call home when they need to, if they need help. But that also means putting a very potentially dangerous device in their hands, a window to everything that's out there.
And I just wanted to give a plug here for actually Five Stones. If you really want to start a discussion with a young person, Five Stones did this amazing video series that I think it's out in schools. And so it's just very small snippets, like 5 minutes each or something. But one is a video of trafficking from the perspective of a victim who's a high school student. And then one is a video of the perspective from her best friend, and one's a video from the trafficker. And they are intense. I mean, you watch these and you have a physical reaction because they're so real, but they're hard to watch. But to start a conversation with a young person, I think they're excellent. You have to devote some time to it. You can't just show it to a young person and walk away. You're going to have a discussion with them about what this means. And it shows the very, the way it happens where you think someone cares about you and they're your boyfriend and you start hanging out with them, and how that leads to trafficking. And then what the trafficker is thinking from the very beginning, he knows where this is going, but the victim doesn't know. And then from the best friend who's kind of like, why is my friend changing? I don't understand this. They're very good. They're very well made.
I just wanted to add one thought about social media. And how many of you guys are friends with your children or grandchildren on Facebook? Okay. How many of you are involved with them on Instagram? A few of you. Okay. So kids have multiple accounts. They have multiple ways of communicating online. I had one lady come to me and she said, I had no idea this was going on in my daughter's world. I'm on her Facebook account. I check it every day. Guess what? Her daughter wasn't on Facebook every day. She wasn't using her Facebook account, but she was using other accounts too. So if your daughter or son has a squeaky clean Facebook account, that there's nothing suspicious on there, or nary a swear word or an inappropriate comment from a friend, you may just want to double check that too, because they might have multiple accounts, or they might be using other social media to communicate with their friends. To the gentleman's point, getting to know your children's friends real time, real face-to-face, the real people in their lives is the best way you can get a picture of what your kids might be involved in after school, on weekends, etc.
I want to add to this, of course, because this is what we're facing with social media. The first thing is I have 4 grown children who are in college, and the internet accessibility in the home and cell phones, once we wound up with 2 households when I went through a divorce with their father, then the rules changed. But fortunately, we came to agreements about blocking internet service at a certain time of night. We literally did that in both of our homes. We also didn't allow cell phones at the table. And they weren't allowed to take their cell phones to school. I mean, they could take them, but they had to turn them off when they were in school, and then when school was over, then they can turn them back on. And they were close enough in age that they kind of helped each other with that, because it's so tempting when your friends are sitting there in school using this technology and their parents are not paying attention. But what my kids have told me now that they're all in college, is they're really grateful that we towed that line for them, because they chafed at it, but they look back and they said, we know you did it because you loved us and you were protecting us. The other thing in presentations I've been giving in this last year, the young people in your life, they may know a lot more about how trafficking is occurring than you may realize. It may shock you they could give you an education oftentimes at middle school age and certainly high school age. If they're very active in social media, they can tell you the sites that they know to stay away from, or where things are happening, and that they even check in and see what's going on because they're curious.
The middle school has had the Beaver Dam Police Department come in and give presentations on internet safety. And what we've learned is that kids aren't using Facebook anymore. They call that the old person. They're using so many different apps now. Make sure you know what those apps are, and there are hidden apps. There are apps that look like a calculator. You open it up, it looks like a calculator. It functions as a calculator. But if you put a password in it, it stores photos. And a lot of times that's where you're going to find inappropriate photos that they're taking or receiving. So make sure you know what those apps are. I also tell them that there's no reason for them to have some of these apps. The app that she had up here for Kick, there's no reason for them to have these apps. There are other ways to communicate with each other that aren't hooking up strangers with each other. And some of the apps that the kids named, when I Googled them, that's all it is. It's how you can talk to strangers. It's how you can meet up with someone that might have the same interests as you. And there's no reason that these children need to be seeking out other people when they have classrooms full that they can meet up with.
Yeah, I would say if you check your kids' phones and they have Omegle on there, take it off. Okay, that is a horrible one. It's where you literally meet strange perverts. Omegle. Omegle. O-M-E-G-L-E. I've had so many cases come out of that. It pairs you up with a stranger. And if you go, I'm not suggesting you do this, but if you did go on there tonight and you went on it, within a minute you're going to see some naked dudes. Because that's what people go on there for.
I just wanted to add something too about gaming. I want to tread gently here, but we've been speaking about female victims and male abusers here tonight, because that is what the majority is. And there's a lot of games out there that have sexually violent content. And I was at a middle school conference speaking to young men about pornography. And I shared my story, and one of the young boys came up to me afterwards. He was 11. And he said to me, I think I know what you're talking about, because I think this is in my game. And so I asked him to pull his game up, and I can't even remember what the name of it was because I was so shocked. I was just trying to interact with this young man. And he pulled this game up and he said, not everybody gets this, but because I beat all the levels, I got to go into this special room. And in this, I said, will you show me? And he showed me this special room that he had earned by being the biggest, the bravest, the strongest conqueror. And this room was a torture chamber. And there were naked women chained in this room, and he earned tools to hurt them with. This child was 11. This was on his phone. And so I just want to caution you about gaming. If there is any rating on there, go on the gaming description sites, find out what these games are about. I would have never even known to think of that until that young man approached me that day. I spent an hour with that young man talking about women and respecting women and why that was wrong. He had no idea. He thought it was a game. But when 11 turns to 14, and 14's at a party with a bunch of his drunk friends, and they're pulling porn out, and then there's live girls available, this escalates very quickly. So gaming, I would just be very aware of the games your kids are involved in.
So I'm from Dodge County. I work with a voluntary mental health program. So my question for you is, what can I tell my at-risk kids to help them with sex trafficking?
I struggle with at-risk. I know what you're saying. But what I'm finding with my work with sexual assault victims and trafficking victims is that all of our kids are at risk. Because even if they're not actively involved in some of these things we're talking about, they may all know someone who is. And the ages are getting younger and younger for exposure. I think you, Morgan, had mentioned that they know a lot more than we think they do. And they can tell you stories about their friends at school and that. So I think we engage new conversations with the kids in our lives to find out, what do they know? What are their questions? And as far as the work that you're doing in your community, many of us are here tonight probably because we're in caregiving roles or we have concerns. And one of the things that we really just need to do is to be hyper aware of what's going on in our schools, in our neighborhoods. And the kids will tell you. I make it a point every time I'm talking to middle school and high school age groups to ask them, you know, where's the dangerous spots? Who are the drug dealers? What's going on? And they know that. We don't want to think they do, but they do. And so in your situation, I think just being aware of the signs, getting those conversations started with them and finding out what they know, what are they concerned about? You know, ask them, what are you afraid of about trafficking? There was a suicide, another teen suicide in my town on Wednesday, and part of the counseling process in that is to ask them, you know, how they're processing that and what's going on with them. And kids want to talk. Kids want to talk and they want to share their fears and concerns with you. They want to share their shames, and they want us to help them. And so I think just getting those conversations started, really asking the kids, what do they need, and yeah.
I also want to answer your question. Kids don't know what they need sometimes. Oftentimes, at-risk kids don't know what they want. Often is that there's a deeper need that needs to be filled, but they've been sort of trying to be satisfied with less than what they actually need. Like, if they're hungry, do they eat? Do they recognize hunger? So having basic good self-care, but also helping them appreciate that they need a plan for safety. So often when individuals show up at a domestic violence center or make a phone call, the first thing that has to be addressed is, are you safe in this moment? And what is making you feel unsafe, and how can you get safe? And then what's going to make you safe for the night? And how will you be safe tomorrow? But having a plan before it's needed is so important with our at-risk youth, that they know how to get safety. What if their phone's taken? What's their next option? What if something happens and they find themselves somewhere that they realize, I don't want to be here? How are they going to reach out? Discussing it before it ever happens, and hopefully it never happens, but discussing it will not only help them keep themselves safe, but they might actually be able to help someone else become safe.
And I also think providing a judgment-free zone is really important because the traffickers play on that. Okay, say, it gets to the point where you're actually having sex with strangers for money, they're gonna say, I'm gonna tell everyone that you're a whore, that you're a prostitute, whatever it is. But say it's a step before that. Say it's the step where they've had sex with the trafficker. And they're gonna say, I'm gonna tell your parents you had sex. And say it's a step before that. I'm gonna tell your parents you kissed me. And say it's a step before that. I'm gonna tell your parents that you sent me a picture. Or the step before that, I'm gonna tell your parents that you said you thought I was sexy. Whatever it is. Okay, you need to break that cycle of the trafficker grooming these young people that what you have done already is bad. And you can't tell anyone. Because if you tell someone, everybody's gonna know what a bad kid you are, how bad. So breaking that cycle of letting kids know, whatever it is, you can tell me, okay, and I will be there for you. And look, they're not gonna tell you the first time you ask, and they're probably not gonna tell you the second time. It's the same with my victims. My victims, when I first meet them, say, nope, I love him, he's great, he's my boyfriend. And by the 10th time I meet them, they're telling me how he burned them with a cigarette, or how he called them, your mother's never gonna love you, and your kids don't love you, and you're horrible, all these things. It's not gonna be the first time, but establishing that constant contact, saying, you can tell me, it's gonna be okay, I'm not gonna judge you, and I'm still gonna be here, is gonna go a long way.
I just wanted to add to that too. One of the tools they use is isolation. We saw that in the video. This girl is becoming estranged from her friends, from her family, and that's the tool that the groomers use, is to get her away by herself, because then he can lie to her and he can tell her everything he needs to tell her to control. So one thing that I like to talk to parents about a lot is that we need to break this hiddenness of this whole thing. We need to be comfortable talking about these things around the kitchen table. There needs to be a safe, judgment-free zone. That's a great way to put it, so that they know that they can come to you. And it might not be you as a parent. So what I encourage kids to do and parents to work as collaboratively is to come up with a safety plan that includes some safe adults. It's on one of the handouts that Five Stones has out there. They suggest finding 5 people that you can trust. For some kids that might be hard. It might be 1 or 2 people, but they need to have somebody in their life that they can go to and be completely transparent. And if you can, the younger you can start that, the less opportunities I think the groomers have to feed into that isolation, shame, and fear.
So just in the interest of keeping us on track time-wise, I want to note that we do have some people standing in the back waiting to ask some questions. So I really want to honor your questions, and I don't want to miss out on anything. So I just want to be aware that we still have the mic going around. So let's really try to get through all of our questions. We really do want to hear from you and answer.
Hi, my name's Bobby Joe, sexual assault victim advocate at PAVE. We serve Jefferson and Dodge County, and I know there was a couple questions about what you can do for victims, and we have a shelter. We have served victims of trafficking, and they've stayed with us before. And if we're full, we'll do everything in our power to call the 50-some other shelters within Wisconsin to find them a place.
We also provide community client services for anybody who just needs somebody to talk to, somebody who we listen, we give advice. We also have, we have started a teen group here in Beaver Dam for Dodge County. It's a judgment-free zone for all kids. Middle school and high school. So just know that you do have resources here in Dodge County and Jefferson County. So
Hi. I actually have a question. How do you tell your loved ones about these without getting frustrated? Like,
Can you clarify your question?
sorry, I'm a little nervous.
No, you're okay.
Like I have a sister, and I just want her to know to be safe. How do I tell her to be safe?
I'll be around after, and Morgan will be around after. We can talk about some specific strategies that you can use with your sister, but so come talk to us after, okay? To answer the question globally, if you have a loved one who you think is at risk, maybe it's a child or a sibling, or, neighbor, friend, coworker, it doesn't really matter. Anybody who is in your circle of influence, if you're concerned about them, I just would encourage you to take a risk and get involved. One of the biggest things victims tell me is that they've tried to talk to people about it, and the people have not responded because, one, we don't know what to say, right? It's an awkward conversation. And another thing, it's an uncomfortable, and we don't want to get involved. We don't want to put our nose in where we don't belong, those kinds of thoughts. And so I just want to encourage you that reaching out to someone who you think is at risk, no matter what the at-risk behavior is or what the danger you think they might be in, it's always okay to show concern and kindness to that person.
Yes, a person who's being victimized is invisible. I remember feeling invisible, to the point that when I attempted suicide at the age of 29, it was just a matter of just disappearing. It was just the last step in the role of becoming completely invisible. So being able to break that invisibility is a big burden to put on somebody who's in the middle of being victimized. So that's why we as community members have such a valuable role, is to not let anyone in your life be invisible. Pay attention, reach out to them. The people who helped me were not my relatives. I did not have the help of law enforcement until many years later when it became time to start telling my story. But it was people who saw that things weren't right. I was a mature woman when they offered to help me, but I knew I could trust them. After all that I had been through, I figured I could take one more chance on somebody who sincerely offered their help. Even though they didn't really know what to do, they helped me find out what to do to recover. You could be that person.
Hi, I'm both concerned and very curious. Once incarcerated, does the perpetrator have access to the internet to continue viewing pornography or making contacts or unsavory conversation? Thank you.
In my experience, there are starting to have internet access in incarceration, but it's very limited and very monitored. And there's always going to be no contact orders where they cannot contact the victims. If they did, that would be a violation and there would be further consequences. I have never heard of anyone being able to access pornography or other types of material while incarcerated.
Having 4 prisons in Dodge County, I know a little bit about this. It's actually my role in the state among the prosecutors. There is now, it used to be no internet access for prisoners, and now because of the way the world has changed, to find jobs, to get job skills, there is some internet access, but it is heavily restricted. But even after inmates leave prison, many of these offenders, they leave as sex offenders because of the nature of the crime. And the Department of Corrections, Community Corrections, when they're on extended supervision, what we used to call parole, they oftentimes are not allowed to have any kind of electronic devices, no cell phones, no internet. They may be allowed to have some sort of connection but they'll have a lot of programs placed on them that give the department the ability to restrict it. And so, and I have had a number of offenders who have, in sex cases, who have come back before the courts on revocation of their parole, their extended supervision, their probations, for merely having these devices and having them be unrestricted. We've had people go to prison after being revoked because and their violation was they had a phone they didn't tell their agent about. So it is heavily restricted.
I know here tonight you talked about a lot of the victims being her, she, a lot of girls, a lot of women. And I don't know what it looks like for Dodge County or even Wisconsin, but what is the prevalence of boys and men being trafficked? Because we know that does happen to our boys as well.
I don't have a statistic. I can just tell you I know it does happen. There has not been a case in my district, in the Western District of Wisconsin, where there's been a male victim. But I know around the country, such cases have been prosecuted. I would wager to say, I mean, it's just fair to say that the majority are female, but I can't give you an exact number, and I certainly am aware there are male victims.
And I guess I would say that's happened right here in Dodge County. We've talked a lot about what we're thinking about prostitution, but we have to think about other sex offenses that are commercialized, particularly the manufacture of child pornography. And one of the most heinous cases that I've ever known about, prosecuted by former DA Steve Bauer here, happened right here in Beaver Dam, in the hotels here in Beaver Dam, where a group of men had a number of male young victims. They were making child pornography for the purposes of selling that child pornography. And so that is occurring.
I just want to add to that too. The cases of male victims are increasing, but the reporting statistics for males who have been sexually assaulted or trafficked are very low. And there's a lot of thought behind why that is, but most young men are ashamed and do not want to come forward and report. And so I think that as we begin to create a safe environment for reporting, and this judgment-free environment that we've been talking about, I'm hopeful that that will change, because sexual assault among young men is a very real thing, and it's happening right here. It's happening in my community, and there's just a lot of complex issues with male sexual assault victims that are difficult and complex to address.
When I was a child, and it was mostly about the pornography and the filming, it was almost 50-50, gender-wise. I think that males have a harder time self-identifying when they get older, that this has happened to them, if they have survived it. I just came back from a brief 10-day journey back to where I used to live on an island in Washington State, Orcas Island. This is in the paper, so I can share this with you. I was helping a domestic violence agency with their accreditation review, and while I was there, they told me about something that had opened up in the year that I've been gone. A very respected member of the community in his 40s, father, his son had died a little over a year ago, mysteriously, supposedly from a fall from a tree. But a couple of months ago, this man was found by the FBI through the FBI finding the head of a pornographic children's, mostly boys, pornographic ring in New York. They traced communications all over the country. And one of those, a series of communications went directly to one person on this little island I used to live and where I had raised my children and where this boy, it was this boy's father. And he is now undergoing sentencing for promoting the pornography of children, and it was primarily boys. And he claimed he never acted on it, but they're going to reopen the case of his son's death because it looks suspicious.
I'm wondering if you, observe this, odd behavior in somebody, at a grocery store, at a at a stop somewhere. I would imagine kids don't like to be approached. You know, if you have some concerns, what do you recommend?
Well, we have law enforcement in the room, so I would defer to her, but I do work with a lot of law enforcement. I was just at a seminar yesterday speaking about on this topic, and the presenter, I was sharing this with Julie, or one of the other panel members, the presenter was saying that if you see something suspicious, you should approach that child or the person, victim that you're suspecting. And I think any law enforcement officer would tell you absolutely not to do that. But rather, if you do have suspicions, to call law enforcement, you know, be observant, take down license numbers, descriptions, clothing, jewelry, you know, whatever descriptions, stay in the area at a safe distance, but definitely call law enforcement in. One of the detectives up in my area describes a case he had where a good Samaritan went in to help this child, and they ended up injured, and the girl they found later dead. So, I mean, we have to be very careful. These are violent men in many cases, or, you know, women as well. And so we have to be careful about how we're reaching out, but I think from a law enforcement standpoint,
If you see something, don't be afraid to say something. There's no officer that's going to demean you or tell you that you shouldn't call because you thought something is suspicious. That's what we're there for, and we'd rather be safe than you not say something and hear about it on the news later and you could have stopped it.
I just meant for them to approach the victim, like as a civilian.
Yep, that's what I'm saying. Yep, call us and we'll... It's okay.
And I just want to say also, I know this from going to trial, that, you know, if you call law enforcement and they go out and check and nothing happens, you might think it's over. But I can tell you, when I go to trial, I track back every one of these law enforcement contacts. And sometimes I'll call someone, I'll see that there was a call, and I'll call the officer and say, hey, what happened? And they say, yeah, I went out and I didn't make any arrests or anything, but I saw this girl, and she was with this guy, and this is what was happening. That's important evidence at my trial. So even though at the time nothing may result, every time it's documented, every time something suspicious is documented, if I take this case to trial in the future, that's going to be important, because even if it's the only thing putting that victim in the same grocery store or in the same car as that trafficker, that can be very important to me. So I highly, you know, yes, report it. Maybe nothing will happen, maybe something will. But even if it doesn't, it's documented for the future.
Hi, I'm a nursing student down the road here at Marine Park, and in 6 months I'm going to be launched into the healthcare field, and I want to specialize in emergency medicine. What is this sex trafficking victim going to look like to me in the emergency department? Like, is there call signs or certain things that I should be aware of?
We have gone out and trained a lot of nurses. They're called SANE nurses, sexual assault nurse examiners, to be aware, because these victims may disclose to medical providers, right? So if you see someone who has typical what you might think of as domestic violence injuries, there's also the sexually transmitted diseases. There's the person who's there, and they're there with their boyfriend or their father who won't leave the room, who's monitoring them very close, who's speaking for them. You know, it's important to get these people alone so that they can make their own statement. And like I said, look, you know, maybe nothing comes of that at that moment, but I can't tell you how many times I have used at trial pictures that were from medical exams where the victim will say, yeah, at the time I didn't tell the nurse anything was going on. Well, why didn't you tell her? Well, because I was scared, because he was there. But then I'll show the picture of the bruise around her neck. I'll show the picture of the scratch down her, whatever it is. That documentation has been very important. But I think you're going to be looking for a lot of the same things that you look for in domestic violence cases, but also the sexual trauma.
One thing too, they might not have control over their, they might not have a wallet, they might not have any ID with them, they might not have a phone, they might not be clothed appropriately. Those are some of the things, and you mentioned, you know, never being left alone. So if it seems suspicious, you know, I guess I would say go with your gut. But for sure get her into the exam room, alone. The SANE nurses are incredibly gifted and trained, and most of them, I don't know if that's an area that you want to go into, but they have special training to flush out some of those conversations because they may not have any physical signs at that moment, and they might be there for something completely different.
In your opinion, are the traffickers, have they been abused themselves, or is it purely greed, do you think?
Some of them, the one I showed you up there, Adonis, his father was a pimp. His father was a pimp, but on his mother's side, his mother was very upstanding. His grandparents were law enforcement. His grandfather was a detective. He had a very good childhood. He had college scholarships. He was not abused, but he chose to emulate his father's footsteps. Alexander Klubal, the guy who drove down to Tennessee and got the girl, he was not abused. He had a lot of mental health issues. I'm trying to think of the other ones. Montegross, the guy in Sparta, was not abused, but he was a drug addict and was getting money for his own drug habit. They come from a variety of backgrounds. They probably do have a lot of vulnerabilities, but just like the victims have a lot of different vulnerabilities. But I haven't, this is just my personal experience in the cases I have prosecuted, they haven't disclosed that kind of background or that kind of sexual abuse in their past.
And my experience is more with the abuse of children in some of the other areas. And what we see is people that sexually abuse children oftentimes themselves have been victims. There is a generational cycle that goes on. So people that are interested in child pornography oftentimes have been abused or have had some sort of trauma in their life that has led them to become interested in that. People that engage in sexual assault of a child in the context of this and who patronize child prostitutes, they may be very well victims themselves at some point. That's not to say that someone who's a victim of sexual abuse, though, is going to become a sexual abuser. I don't want that to be the message, because I don't think that's the norm. But that is a very common trait among the abusers.
And I totally agree with what he said, but I also, I do deal with a lot of child pornography cases, and those people are pedophiles, right? They like naked children, they like children engaging in sexually explicit conduct. They're different than the traffickers. The traffickers are in it, in my experience, not because they like child pornography. They want the money. They are more like drug dealers. And that's just in my experience. So I have not dealt with a trafficker who I think is a pedophile, who is attracted to small children or any children, aside from maybe a developed young woman who they are trafficking, and that's different than a pedophile.
I'm going to let us take just a couple more questions, and then I just want to honor people's time. But if people are leaving, please make sure you have flipped over that survey and done the backside, because what we want to see is what you knew when you came in and what you know going out. So go ahead, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Patty Cake, and I'm with Guardians of the Children. South Central Dodge County is one of our counties, and I guess it's not really a question at this point. That I just want to say, call, if ever in doubt. From our experience, just call, report it. Professionals are the ones that look into it, and you're not going to be pulled into something, quote unquote, so don't be scared of calling or reporting it. I think from what we've heard out in the communities is it's a fear that if they pick up the phone, if any of you pick up the phone, you're going to be pulled into court, or your life's going to be turned around, and that's not true. But you could help a child turn their life around. So it was really just a comment. Just call, report it, please.
Yeah, thank you. And the National Human Trafficking Hotline, the 800 number, you don't even have to identify yourself. And you can just give information. All of the information given to them is farmed out as leads to real agents on the ground. They get these leads every day, and I get all the leads not because I investigate them, but because I prosecute them. So I see them, and I know these calls result in leads. Now, is it going to result in the prosecution of someone? I don't know. Is it going to result in the helping of a victim? I don't know, but it's not going to hurt.
I wanted to bring everyone's attention to something you can access very easily from home. If you go to the Polaris project.org website, so the phone number that was on Julie's presentation, that organization that mans that phone number, they have this year put out a very comprehensive report. It's free, you can download it. It's 179 pages. And if you want to understand in simple language the industries that are involved in trafficking and how those same industries can disrupt it, you would have a lot of reason for hope. And that's one of the things I always want to make sure that when we have these discussions, you look for where are the answers? What are we learning from this? This report that you can access online for free is made up from calls that have happened over a period of time that have been assessed from outside agencies, and it's been put together with the consultation of over 20 survivors. So you get a very comprehensive understanding for yourself as a common, citizen of Wisconsin. They even have reports for each state. You can look up what's going on in Wisconsin, and it's just based on the calls. It's not based on what we don't know, but on what is known from what's actually happening.
I just want to add one thought real quick. You have an amazing organization here who put this on today, Five Stones in Beaver Dam. If you have any inclination about getting involved in this at the next level, contact them, because they can help you with training and understanding and tools and tips and what to do in what situation. So you're very, very fortunate that you have this core of committed people here in your town who are really willing to advocate for awareness and change.
Thank you. That's a great note to transition. Just in the interest of time, we're going to have to cut off questions, but please, if you have a burning question that you weren't able to ask, you can always come up to one of our panel members or a speaker afterwards and chat with them and ask them those questions. We do have in the room a retired police officer, Craig Payne. I'm looking for, where'd you go? He's left? Oh, okay. Never mind that then. So what I'd like to do now is call Gene up. Gene Schmidt is a pastor in Watertown. He's also a singer-songwriter. I would invite the panel to go ahead and you can have a seat again so that you're getting comfortable for our last song. Yes, thank you so much. Thank you. As we move into our closing song, I want to mention that trafficking has been reported in all 72 counties in Wisconsin. So we know it's here, and we've seen tonight and heard tonight that we know it's here. The average age is 13, and you can all think of people in your lives and in your worlds who are in that age range. 11, 12, 13, 14. Those are the ages that we're seeing kids trafficked. So this is a song that Gene wrote. Are you going to say anything about that?
Well, wrote it 2 or 3 months ago, and I think from everything I've heard tonight, the lyrics impact me more than ever before, especially the gal concerned about her sister. Amen? It's called Not in Our Town, and I hope everyone here is not wanting any of this in their town. Amen? Tell me who will defend our daughters? Who will defend our sons? Make this town a better place where they want to grow up. Oh, when others want to force and tear those values down, who will say, not in our town? Who will defend what is right? Who will stand against what is wrong? Defend those family values, oh, that made this town strong. Who will stand against anything, oh, that tears those values down? If it hurts our sons and daughters, we say, not in our town. We say, not in our town. They found her body by the side of the road, trafficking girls like meat that can be bought and be sold. I say enough, we've got to stand for what we believe and stand for all we think and do, and believe. Who will defend what is right? Who will stand against what is wrong? Oh, defend those family values that made this town strong. Stand against anything I know that will tear those values down. If it hurts our sons and daughters, we say, not in our town. We say, not in our town. Get so afraid to defend what is right. Some battles are worth fighting for and should never be ignored. Who will defend what is right? Who will stand against what is wrong? Who will defend those family values that made this town so strong? Stand against anything we know that will tear those values down. If it hurts our sons and daughters, we should say, not in our town. We say, not in our town. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean. Thank you. You had a couple things that you wanted to share.
In our town, lawn signs, we have 35 tonight. Urge you to take them and get the word out. As well, we have a petition in the back. Pete, can you raise your hand back there? Go and see Pete. It's a petition to advocate for the revoking of the liquor licenses of the strip clubs that had the sex trafficking in them. Amen? Come on. Not in our town.
So,
and finally,
sorry.
a message, a little card. Scott Fitzgerald, we've been working with him, and we're praying that the laws will get much stricter and tougher to shut this completely down in our state. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jean. So again, please fill out the back of your survey. You can just leave them on your chairs if you like, and we'll come get them, or there's a basket with Jerry in the back. But we also invite you to go back into 1025, have some more coffee and treats as you kind of digest and debrief. Sometimes we just feel like we need to talk a little bit about everything we've learned because it's heavy. Can we please have another round of applause for our amazing panel and speaker? Thank you all for coming out tonight. You've been a huge blessing to us. Please travel safely on your way home. Tell 3 people what you learned tonight. As we spread the knowledge, we're less vulnerable. Thank you all.